Man, I don't know about you, but it really feels like the Broncos are getting closer to making some big decisions that could completely change this roster. Training camp is finally giving us real answers instead of off-season speculation. And every single practice seems to be revealing something new about where this team is headed. You can just feel that there's something brewing behind the scenes. If you're paying attention, it's getting harder to ignore. And here's the thing. Today's video is a little different because we've actually got two major Broncos stories to break down. First, we're going to talk about a situation developing inside Denver's wide receiver room that could end with a surprising move nobody expected just a few weeks ago. Then we'll dive into another report ranking the most realistic trades the Broncos could still make before the season. Trust me, some of the names being discussed could definitely get Broncos Country talking. Before we jump into all of that, if you're a real Broncos fan, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join us. My name is Andrew. This channel is still brand new, and we're trying to reach our first 500 subscribers. So if you truly believe in the future of this team and want to be part of Broncos Country from the very beginning here on the channel, I'd really appreciate you subscribing. Now, let's get into these two stories because there's a lot to unpack. Let's start with the first story because this one has really picked up steam after the first padded practice of training camp. One thing that's becoming crystal clear is that the Broncos wide receiver room is getting more competitive by the day, and some players are taking full advantage of every single rep. The biggest name making noise right now is second-year receiver Pat Bryant. After another impressive day, Bryant once again found himself being talked about by everyone covering practice. According to Zach Stevens, the biggest takeaways from Monday's practice included Luke Wattenberg leaving the field with a trainer, Riley Moss coming away with an impressive jump ball interception, the Broncos pass rush looking strong with the pads finally on, and once again, Pat Bryant making multiple big catches. And honestly, that's exactly what Broncos fans wanted to see. Bryant isn't just flashing once in a while anymore. He's stacking good practices together, and that's how you force the coaching staff to trust you when the regular season arrives. He's not the only young receiver turning heads either. Marvin Mims Jr. has also continued making explosive plays throughout camp, showing the same speed and big playability that have made him one of the most dangerous weapons on this roster. We already know what Mims brings as an all-pro return specialist, but if he becomes an even bigger part of the offense, that's another level this team can reach. Meanwhile, the Broncos already know exactly what they have in Jalen Waddle and Courtland Sutton. Those are the proven veterans in the room. They're expected to be Bo Nix's top two targets throughout the season. Waddle brings elite speed and separation, while Sutton continues to be the reliable possession receiver who has delivered for years in Denver. With those four names looking locked into roster spots, the conversation naturally shifts to the battle for what's likely the fifth and final receiver position. And that's where things start getting really interesting. The current projection is that Sean Payton keeps 5 wide receivers on the initial 53-man roster. That projected group would include Jalen Waddle, Courtland Sutton, Pat Bryant, Marvin Mims Jr., and Lil Jordan Humphrey, which leaves one notable name on the outside looking in: Troy Franklin. Now, before anyone panics, this isn't because Franklin suddenly became a bad player. It's because the roster is starting to become crowded, and several players are bringing skill sets that better fit what the Broncos may want offensively. One observation that stood out came from Luka Evans, who noted that Franklin wasn't heavily involved during Monday's practice. He simply wasn't getting many opportunities, while other receivers continued making plays. Evans also pointed out something else from an earlier practice. Jonah Ellis's recorded an excellent tipped pass at the line of scrimmage during team drills. Hugh Robinson continued rotating at outside linebacker. The interior defensive line competition involving Aoyoma Uazarik, Sevion Jones, Jordan Jackson, DJ Henningsen, and Nick Onadim remained wide open. But on offense, one receiver quietly kept showing up: Leo Jordan Humphrey. According to Evans, Humphrey received plenty of opportunities, and the entire receiver group continued making plays. That matters. Humphrey may never become one of the stars of this offense, but he gives Sean Payton something coaches absolutely love: blocking. He's one of those players willing to do the dirty work that doesn't always appear in the stat sheet. He helps in the running game, protects the edge, and brings physicality every single snap. That's something Troy Franklin simply doesn't offer at the same level. Because of that, there's now growing speculation that Denver could once again explore a trade involving a young receiver. similar to last year's move that sent Devon Bell to the New Orleans Saints. One projected scenario even suggests the Broncos could trade Troy Franklin to the Washington Commanders in exchange for a 2027 fourth-round draft pick. And honestly, it's not that crazy. The Commanders are trying to get back into serious playoff contention after finishing just one game away from the Super Bowl. Back in 2020, outside of Terry McLaurin, their receiver room doesn't have many established weapons, making Franklin a logical target if they're looking for additional speed and upside. Nothing is guaranteed, of course. Training camp is still unfolding. Players can catch fire over the next few weeks. Injuries can change everything. Sean Payton isn't going to make any decisions until he has all the information. But based on everything we've seen so far, another Broncos trade involving the receiver room doesn't feel impossible anymore. Now, let's move to the second story, because this one takes the conversation even further. A recent analysis ranked the 6 most realistic trades the Broncos could still make before the season begins. It doesn't mean any of these moves are guaranteed to happen, but they are considered the most realistic possibilities as Sean Payton, offensive coordinator Davis Webb, defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, and general manager George Paton continue evaluating the roster during training camp. The first and most likely trade candidate is cornerback Riley Moss. This possibility has gained momentum because Vance Joseph recently talked about first-round rookie Jahdae Barron lining up as a boundary cornerback. If Barron proves he can handle that role opposite Patrick Surtain II, Denver could find itself with a difficult financial decision. Riley Moss is entering the final year of his contract. With Patrick Surtain II already signed to a massive extension, the Broncos may not have enough flexibility to give Moss the kind of contract he'll likely command on the open market. That leaves George Paton with 2 realistic options. The Broncos could trade Moss for 2027 draft picks, or possibly acquire a player who can help immediately this season. The other option would be allowing him to leave in free agency and hoping to receive a compensatory draft pick in 2028. The second possibility involves Joequan McMillian. This really feels like an either-or situation between Moss and McMillian. One of them could eventually become expendable depending on how Jahdae Barron develops. If Barron thrives on the outside, Riley Moss becomes the logical trade candidate. But if Barron struggles there and eventually moves inside, McMillian's position suddenly becomes much less secure. Financially, McMillian would likely cost less to extend than Moss. Moss could reportedly command somewhere between $22 and $25 million per season, while McMillian's next contract is projected closer to $12 to $16 million annually. Even so, the Broncos invested a first-round pick in Barron, and teams usually find a way to get players selected that high onto the field. The third name on the list is Troy Franklin. We've already talked about him earlier, but this report explains another reason why his future isn't completely secure. The addition of Jalen Waddle changed the entire picture at wide receiver. Waddle brings many of the same explosive traits Franklin offers, but he's a much more complete and proven player. Franklin actually took a nice step forward during the 2025 season and became Denver's number 2 receiver. The problem is that drops continued to show up at important moments. And this offseason, the Broncos clearly placed a premium on receivers with reliable hands. Still, there is one major reason Denver may hesitate before moving him. During last year's playoff run, injuries hit the receiver room hard. 2 of the Broncos' top 4 receivers missed significant time, reminding everyone how quickly depth can disappear in the NFL. Because of that experience, Sean Payton may only consider moving Franklin if another team makes an offer that's simply too good to pass up. The fourth possibility is Marvin Mims Jr. This would definitely surprise a lot of Broncos fans. Mims is entering the final year of his rookie contract before becoming eligible for free agency, but his value goes well beyond what he does as a receiver. He's one of the best return specialists in football. He's capable of changing games on special teams, and he's repeatedly delivered clutch offensive plays in big moments over the past few seasons. That combination makes him extremely valuable. If Denver were ever to move Mims, it would almost certainly require an overwhelming offer similar to the trade the New Orleans Saints made last offseason for Devon Bell. Bell had originally been selected in the 7th round of the 2024 NFL Draft, but the Saints offered 4th and 7th round picks, giving the Broncos an offer they simply couldn't refuse. The fifth possibility is completely different because it involves bringing someone into Denver instead of sending someone away. The position in question is tight end. The Broncos have struggled to get consistent production from that room for the past 3 seasons. Despite adding Justin Joly and Dallin Bentley in this year's draft, both players were selected on day 3, and tight end is one of the hardest positions to transition into at the NFL level. Historically, most tight ends need several years before becoming reliable contributors unless they're rare elite athletes. Because of that, the Broncos could eventually explore the trade market if they aren't satisfied with their current options. One interesting name mentioned as a potential target is Chicago Bears tight end Cole Kmet. Finally, the sixth and least likely trade possibility involves backup quarterback Jarrett Stidham. Reports suggest that multiple teams around the league have shown interest in Stidham despite his disappointing performance in the AFC Championship game. However, there are several reasons why Denver may decide to keep him. Stidham has developed a close relationship with starting quarterback Bo Nix. He's also very familiar with offensive coordinator Davis Webb and the entire offensive system. On top of that, Bo Nix has been working his way back from an injury after recently returning to practice. The Broncos probably won't want to risk trading away their most experienced backup quarterback unless Sam Ehlinger takes a massive step forward and clearly proves he's ready to handle that role. Looking at all 6 possibilities together, one thing becomes obvious. These aren't random trade rumors. They're based on roster depth, contract situations, salary cap planning, positional competition, and the difficult decisions every contender eventually has to make. Sean Payton, George Paton, Davis Webb, and Vance Joseph aren't simply trying to identify the best players. They're trying to build the most complete roster possible. That means balancing talent, contracts, depth, special teams value, long-term planning, and immediate production. And that's exactly why these next few weeks of training camp are going to be so important. Every practice matters. Every rep matters. Every catch, every interception, every block. And every mistake could influence who makes the final roster and who could eventually become part of a trade package before the regular season begins. When you put both of today's stories together, they tell us something much bigger than just possible trades. They show that the Broncos are entering a new phase as an organization. For the first time in a while, this coaching staff isn't trying to figure out whether the roster has enough talent to compete. Instead, they're trying to decide which talented players deserve to stay, which ones fit the long-term vision, and whether moving someone now could make the team even stronger in the future. That's actually a good problem to have. Competition across the roster means nobody can afford to get comfortable. Young players like Pat Bryant are taking advantage of every opportunity. Veterans like Jalen Waddle and Courtland Sutton continue setting the standard. Players like Marvin Mims Jr., Troy Franklin, Riley Moss, and Joquan McMillian are all fighting to prove why they belong in Denver's long-term plans. At the same time, George Paton and Sean Payton have to think beyond this season. They have to manage future contracts, salary cap flexibility, roster depth, and prepare this team to compete not only this year, but for years to come. That won't be easy. Some difficult decisions are coming. And not every talented player will still be wearing a Broncos uniform by the time the regular season begins. The good news is that nothing has been decided yet. Training camp is still unfolding. Players still have time to change the narrative, and one great week of practice can completely reshape the conversation. That's why Broncos Country should pay close attention over the next several weeks. Every practice report could reveal another player rising up the depth chart. Every preseason performance could influence the final roster. Every trade rumor will become more believable as roster cutdown day gets closer. No matter what happens, one thing is clear. The Broncos are building a roster with competition, accountability, and high expectations at every position. That's exactly what fans have been asking for, and now we'll find out which players rise to the challenge. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you hit the like button because it really helps the channel grow. I also want to hear your opinion down in the comments. Which of these trade possibilities do you think is the most realistic? Would you trade Troy Franklin? Would you consider moving Riley Moss? Or do you think the Broncos should keep this roster together and give this group a chance to prove itself? And if you're a true Broncos fan who believes this team is heading in the right direction, subscribe to Broncos News Daily. We're still a brand new channel working toward our first 500 subscribers. And we'd love to have you with us from the very beginning of this journey. Thank you so much for watching Broncos Country. Stay safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.